One trade, two waiver wire pickups, to me equals three roster moves that make a whole lot of sense and are very smart for the Saints. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. And initially, I wasn't. I had told you last video I was probably going to take Labor Day weekend off, but you don't really get to take time off, right? So, I was just kind of researching after the last video we did on the Saints' final 53-man roster. I mentioned the trade. Then we had the two waiver additions the following day. So Friday, just kind of going back and let me kind of familiarize these three new players. We knew a little bit about Asim Richards, just that Dallas was more than likely going to release him because they just didn't have a spot for him and made a minimal trade. We gave up a 6th-round pick in 2028, got him and a 7th-round pick in 2028. So basically, no real risk involved in that, especially in the immediate future. And then the two waiver pickups. Now, very familiar with Trey Palmer when we grabbed him, and I saved him for the final spot. But overall, what I liked is the feeling slowly getting reinforced this offseason that the Saints are moving back to the way they used to roster build. What I mean by that is we used to draft very well. Now, early returns, and I do mean early returns right now on this current draft class, looks favorable. It's like we have some talent in there, both guys who are looking like they are, and we're assuming they're ready because they're in some guys like Stutzman and Riley and others are in key backup roles, not to mention Banks is starting on at left tackle. Check that box so far. We really won't know till during the season and probably more importantly over the next couple of seasons how it's going to work out as a whole. But I feel a lot better about this draft class than I have in a long time about a draft class. Responsible free agent signings. Now, Reed, Blackman, probably the two most key ones. And technically, Devin Gottschall was a trade. We gave up a 7th-round pick to get him. It's almost like a free agent move in a weird sort of way, but not really. But I kind of will loosely group that in with we didn't go crazy to acquire three really talented players that we needed to acquire to help out on defense, and especially implementing this new Brandon Staley type defense. These guys are familiar, well, not specifically with his, but the concepts that he's trying to bring in as opposed to the concepts we had been running for the last decade plus. And I think it was a great move there. This one is not quite come to fruition, but I'm hoping what they've done so far is sending a signal they will start doing it, which is they have to stop stupidly overpaying for every single free agent out there. Kind of feel like so far what we saw in the open free agency market. Yeah, I think so. And extending and reworking contracts. I have some issues there, some of the stuff we did in the offseason, but it was primarily because we're trying to get out of cap hell. And I'm hoping that a couple, and they may still work out, but there was a couple that we all raised eyebrows at going, man, you probably overpaid to keep that guy on the roster, but I get why they were doing it. Hopefully that doesn't continue. Those are the last ones, and now we're going to responsibly extend or restructure players. And if we can't make the deal to do it, then you have to be willing to go, that's fine. They're going to move on because we won't overpay them, and we just have to do a really good job of replacing them through the draft, through key free agent signings, through developing players, etc. So I think part of that is you have to find players to develop. Draft, UDFA, you've been through that. You've been through OTAs. You've been through training camp and preseason. Some have worked out. Some haven't. Some you couldn't put on a 53-man, but we've been filling the practice squad up, and you brought some of the guys back you wanted to bring back. All very good jobs. And even to the point where we don't have a full practice squad as of Saturday morning when I'm filming this, I think there's 3 spots left on it available because we're trying to make sure we're getting the right guys, or at least getting guys that can give us a chance and not just summarily filling the spaces, which compared to what we saw the last couple of years when it came to practice squad, I think that's all we were doing. I don't know if there was a real thought process of what we were trying to do with these players. If it was, it's hard for me to see it. What we used to do is we scouted other people's preseason games, eventually who they may keep, who may wind up on waivers, who was on the practice or could wind up on the practice squad that we may want. And over the years, a lot of times we would kind of get some of these players, and they may just be maybe didn't work out and didn't stick around long. They might have been like short term fix to kind of get us through a season or have some depth available that we could use, or some players we really liked and thought we could develop. And in some cases, all those things happen. I mean, the unicorn of the whole thing is obviously Taysom Hill. If you remember the story, Sean Payton was thinking about picking up a wide receiver off of Green Bay. I believe it was Austin Carr, who did have a cup of coffee with us and hung out as one of our depth receiver pieces for a while. But while he's doing that with the scouting department, this guy keeps showing up, and Peyton's like, "Who the hell is that?" Turns out to be Taysom Hill, who we went ahead. Green Bay was trying to sneak through waivers. We put a claim on him, end up with him, and rest is kind of history. You have a Saints Hall of Fame in there. There's no doubt. But there's been other examples over the years, and these are the ones off the top of my head. I really didn't research it, but I can remember Senio Clemente, 2012 draft pick for the Cardinals. Only played there 1 year. They released him. We grabbed him on waivers. He essentially backed up both tackle spots and both guard spots for us for 5 seasons with some spot starts. I think he had 8 or 9 total where he could just fill in at any of those four. He was pretty good at it, pretty valuable piece. So much the Texans eventually threw him a big contract to go start for them at guard, I believe it was. And that was a case of, yeah, we just can't match that. Let him walk, and then we have to go find the replacement for the guy that has been a valuable backup and a spot starter for us over the course of those seasons. Will Lutz, great kicker for us, waived by the Ravens, grabbed him, winds up winning the starting job for I believe 8 seasons he was here. This one was a deep search, but I will never forget this because of the circumstances. Brian De La Puente. Jonathan Goodwin was our starting Super Bowl winning center and a very good one. He leaves in free agency in 2011. We signed Olin Kreutz as a free agent from the Bears, has some injury issues early in the season, misses times. De La Puente ends up that we had signed off of waivers from Seattle to be the backup is filling in. Kreutz actually retired midseason. And De La Puente stepped right in 2011 and rode it all the way out till his contract till 2013 when he ended up leaving in free agency, getting a better deal to move on. And then we did the same thing. We're not going to overpay. We're going to have to go find the next backup piece. We need to get back to that. And when I started looking into these 3 roster moves, I'm going, this has a feel of some of that stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't have a freaking clue if any of these 3 are going to work out. But when you kind of start looking at who they are, where they've been, their age, and some other factors, at least to me, I'm getting the feeling of, okay, we're not throwing darts at the wall anymore, just trying to hit on something. We're actively trying to make good decisions that can help us in depth, in development. And if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, there's no real risk involved with any of specifically these 3 players. We're assuming rookie deals on all 3 of them. It's not a killer to us as far as either salary cap or development. If you need to move on from them and bring in somebody else, back in the way we used to do stuff. So we'll break down each 3 of them real quick because, you know, it's not like I said, we're bringing in Hall of Famers or all pros. We're bringing in developmental guys, but there was a lot of interesting stuff I started uncovering as I was doing a little bit of research, especially in the 2 offensive linemen. I knew the least about those. So we're going to start off with the trade we made on cutdown day right before we got to the final 53. And that was the trade swapping the 28 picks and getting Asim Richards, 6'4", 370-pound, left tackle primarily, 24 years old. Remember that age number. It's a fifth round pick by Dallas in 2023. Now, two members of our current coaching staff were with Dallas when he was drafted. One is our tight end coach, Chase Haslett, who over 2023 for Dallas was their assistant tight end coach and then moved to pass game coordinator in 24. Scott Tolzien was their quarterback coach both those years. Now, while neither one is directly related to what's going on with the offensive line, if you're dealing with tight ends in the passing game and dealing with coaching the quarterbacks, you're familiar with what's going on the offensive line on probably a day-to-day basis. So not that far off to realize we have two current staff members who got a pretty good look at this guy. 23, he played 5 games, had 0 starts, and he over 40 snaps. He was spread out at left tackle, left guard, and right guard. 2024 played in 8 games with 1 start, 177 total snaps at left tackle, 1 at left guard, and on 3 snaps, it looks like PFF was marking him down as a inline tight end, which is probably those short yardage blocking situations, just getting an extra lineman in the block. Here's where it gets interesting. His 1 start that he had in his 2 years in the NFL, he got 60 snaps at left tackle, week 10 last season. Now, looking at PFF's numbers, he had 25 run blocking snaps, graded out at 47.8. That's the high end of failing, but it's still failing. And then 35 pass blocking snaps at 71.3, which is definitely a solid passing grade. And overall, 59.7 kind of puts it in the average. But in that game, on the opposing sideline was Kellen Moore, Doug Nussmeier, and TJ Paganetti, 3 of our current member staffs that were in Philly. So week 10, he rolled into the eventual Super Bowl champs, played 60 snaps against, I'll argue anybody on this, the best defensive line that the NFL had last year, and held his own at the very least. Yeah, it may have been a little light in run blocking, but hell, who really could run block against those guys? But I'm liking the fact that dealing with that pass rush, he graded out pretty high in pass blocking. So I kind of keep looking at this as a competitive rebuild and talking about having some knowledge about the players you're bringing in and why you're bringing them in. You have 2 guys kind of directly involved with this young man playing, and then 3 who, at least for 1 week, got a really good look at him in game action, knowing full well, Jesus, we had one of the best defenses in the league, and this young man held his own, held up. So something like that becomes available in the scenario in Dallas where you can get him, you got to get him. Again, I have no idea how that's going to work out. It may fail spectacularly, but to me, this is a well-calculated, thought-out reason why you make that trade where you really didn't give up anything to bring in a player. Because when you're looking at our offensive line depth, we definitely needed help there, and we needed it quick. So that's why I think that one's a smart one. Moving on to Xavier Truss, okay, our second. It was a waiver claim. Played 6 seasons at Georgia in college, 2019 to 2024, 6'7", 320 pounds. He was an undrafted free agent that Denver picked up, 24 years old. And in his time in Georgia, he played every position along the offensive line except center. And when I was looking this up, that's why Cineo Calamenti popped into my head. He did have 18 starts at left guard, 22 starts at right tackle. He was in 2023, he was all SEC second team, and that's when he was starting at left guard. And he was a prominent member. And look, if you're familiar with college football in Georgia, they normally pump out some really good offensive linemen over the years. He was a prominent member in their back-to-back national championships. So Denver signs him as a UDFA. They had him at right tackle all of preseason, or the whole offseason into preseason, including the snaps he took against us in the preseason game last Sunday. So I went back and looked at his draft profile. And I might add, I don't know what Denver's intentions. It might have been waive him, put him on the practice squad if he cleared, which he obviously didn't, because Denver has a very good offensive line and probably kind of the same situation as Dallas. We've got guys there that we're just not going to be able to keep on the 53 man So they get exposed on the waiver wire no matter what Denver's actual intent was afterwards. But when you're looking at someone who played that much football at a high level in college at a place where typically all the offensive lineman is good, and it kind of sounds like they used him as a piece. Where do we need him? He can do the job there. That's how we're going to use him. So I went back and was looking at his draft profile. They were kind of all over the place, the ones I could find. In some places I go to find a draft profile, I couldn't even find his name. So kind of just paraphrasing what I could find and put together on him, it kind of seems like nobody was sure how to profile him of what offensive line position he could play. But some of the more positive ones that were saying, he might be a seventh round pick, more than likely a UDFA. They were using phrases like developmental, plays many spots. So you may find one spot as a backup or could develop him into a piece where he can slide into your depth at offensive line and be able to competently fill in at multiple spots. But developmental piece was basically kept showing up. So I like this one because again, we need offensive line depth. Going out and trying to find it isn't easy. So one of the solutions possibly being, and they had a good look. I believe he had 25 snaps against us. There may be enough there where they're thinking whether they're going to move him to guard because some of his draft profiles were saying, yeah, he's a guard, and others were saying, no, he's a right tackle. And they're looking at, we can find the spot for him, we can develop him. Good base, good understanding from college. Cup of coffee with an offense that's really, really good with a really good offensive line in preseason. Now we got him. Let's see if we can develop him. And again, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I feel like they once again made some type of calculated move with the information that I could find available going, yeah, it makes sense to bring him in. Let's see what we have with him. Once again, you got a guy on a rookie deal. You didn't give up anything to get him there. And if it doesn't work out, no offense to him, but it's not that hard to move on if you need to find the next developmental depth piece you need to replace him. So again, based off calculations, could be a smart move, but it's not a dumb move. And I think maybe that's one of the important themes we're talking about here. Last one is Trey Palmer, who I was extremely familiar with. Hell of a football player in high school in Louisiana. Goes to LSU in 2019. Was there from 2019 to 2021. Put up some decent numbers. I think career-wise about 500 yards receiving, I believe 4 or 5 touchdowns. Because I do remember him making some big plays and big catches. Fortunately, the log jam at wide receiver that LSU had over that course, he could get some playing time, but it was, you know, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson early on, Terrence Marshall, Keyshawn Boutte, Brian Thomas Jr. later on. Kind of hard for him to get traction and establish himself as the guy. And there were others. That's just names you can clearly think of because all of them are in the NFL right now in some way, shape, or form. So he transfers to Nebraska in 2022, 71 catches, 1,043 yards, which I didn't realize this, but apparently that's the Nebraska single season record for receiving yards. But solid, good player with really 1 year production because he couldn't fight all the way through that log jam of wide receivers at LSU. Fell to the 6th round. Tampa Bay grabbed him. So he shows up on a team already has Mike Evans and a healthy Chris Godwin at the time. And Tampa Bay, as I'm looking back over the years that he's there, they just keep bringing in receivers. They kind of know who their top 2 guys are, but they brought, when they drafted Palmer, they also drafted Raheem Jarrett. They had just signed a veteran, David Moore, kind of like Cedric Wilson Jr., been in the league for, I think at that time, about 7 years, a couple of different teams, solid pro type receiver. Another rookie named Ryan Miller, who I believe is still there. And then every year was add somebody else, drafted Jalen McMillan, signed Sterling Shepard, another vet who's been around. This year, with Godwin hurt, and you're thinking, somebody like Palmer has a chance to make some hay. Well, they go ahead and draft Emeka Buka in the first round, which kind of signals what's going on there. They're expecting Godwin back, and they still bring in Tez Johnson, another high rookie prospect. So Palmer hits the waiver wire, and I think considering the Saints' depth or possibly lack thereof in their receiving room. And you got a guy he's been in the NFL 2 years. He's played some. It's sort of like, Richards with Dallas. Hasn't started, but if you go look back and look at his game charts, he had a couple games where he did start creeping up some target, make some catches, make some plays, and then other games where he just wasn't used much. So being in Tampa Bay, we've seen him 4 times in the last 2 years in his NFL career, plus available film. That's another one. I think the Saints could competently look at it enough and go, Olavi and Shahid are fine, but when you look at Cook, the Denver game in preseason is really the only one he played significant snaps, and I know I'm not the only one thinking this, going, there may be some separation issues there. We may not have what we think we thought we were going to have. We knew he was a veteran, and in training camp it seemed to be there, but now we're not so sure. Tipton, we loved what we've seen so far, but this will be the second year in a row that we're going to have to go into the regular season going, will it translate onto the field where he's going to make plays? Wilson Jr., he made it, but there's some question marks there. Um, and, that big drop he had on that dime shuck through in the red zone, that one just sticks in the back of my head because the Cedric Wilson Jr. for most of his career never dropped balls, but might have just been one catch. But you're going, yeah, I don't know. We may need some help there, and then we'll find out what we have in Devon Vele. But he's a little bit different type receiver than Palmer and these other guys. So if Palmer just shows up with his 4.3 speed, and he has 4.3 speed, blow tops off of defenses and make some separation, put some pressure on the defense when you're bringing him in as your fourth or fifth receiver, it's conceivable he could bump some of these guys off the receiving depth chart and work his way in there. So again, all pro, Saints Hall of Famer. I honestly not saying that he couldn't do it, but probably not. But adding these valuable depth pieces, again, 24 years old, on a rookie deal. If it works out, fantastic. If he helps us out this season in some tough spots and makes some plays, great. Whatever we get beyond that, we get. But if it doesn't work out, again, rookie deal, no real investment involved whatsoever. And again, no offense to Mr. Palmer, but if it doesn't work out, it is not that difficult to go, we need to move on, even if you need to do it next week or whenever, and move on to the next step in the process. So I can't think like last year, it just seemed like, and it's, I clearly remember this is like our practice squad was, we cut down to 53 and then brought majority of players right back in. I know there were some we picked up and added elsewhere, but it seemed like practice squad was signed, and the only thing we used it for was ping, like I'm thinking Kyle Hergel pinged back and forth a couple of times of being released, re-signed to the practice squad, being brought up, and there were others, but no real sign. Are we really developing? Are we really in with a purpose with this? Is this just the guys we had left over and we won't, not even looking at other players that might actually bring. And no disrespect to Kyle Hergel, I just know he probably had the most times of being released and re-signed to the practice squad, back to the 53 and released, etc. But that seemed to be our MO. And it was like, was there any rhyme to reason of who we were bringing in, what we were trying to do? Or were we just signing bodies to fill the roster? And it seemed to me it was more of that. And it also seemed to me that even whoever was there as young players, we weren't real interested in trying to develop them either. So these three moves, in my opinion, may signal a change back into kind of the way we did things when, look, that back end of the roster is still hugely important. God knows 2024 proved that to us. You got to find something here in some way to make them competitive so you can actually have a competitive rebuild. And who knows? You may still find that Taysom Hill diamond in the rough unicorn somewhere in there. But if you're not looking for it, then the answer to the question is, can you find one? No, because you're not even trying. So, what we have today, kind of wanted to roll through that. Hope everybody's having a safe and very safe and happy Labor Day weekend. At least down here in South Louisiana, looks like we're breaking some nice weather for the rest of the weekend. So that's awesome. Got some activities to do. Hope you do too. But before you do that, Who Dat fans, let me know in the comments what you think about specifically adding these three players. Is there any value there? Like I tend to see it, but I think more importantly, maybe a change back into the process of when we are going to add players off of waivers or sign them off other teams' practice squads, that we're kind of doing it with the basis of information and forward thinking to something that might actually help the team, as opposed to no, we're just signing somebody because we have a spot open. The fact that we still are leaving three open spots in the practice squad, and they were asked about it a couple of times during the week during media sessions, and they're saying, well, it's a work in progress. We're looking here. We're, basically sending the signal. We're just not signing three guys to sign them. We're trying to find the right three guys that we need to bring in or want to bring in and develop. So let me know what you think about that down in the comments. Kellen Moore is meeting with the media on Monday, so even though it's Labor Day, I'm assuming it's a normal, and it should be because Sunday, week from tomorrow, we're opening against the Cardinals. Normal NFL regular season week. So we're going to start our normal NFL regular season week list of shows, breaking down everything going into the game. And then come a week from tomorrow, we get to find out exactly how this competitive rebuild is going to look. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and Who Dat.